Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Bella DeSoriano, board member of OutCare Health, and my pronouns are she, her. Thank you for joining us today for OutCare OutTalk series, a webinar series that's devoted to discussing diversity and intersectionality within LGBTQ plus communities. We have many people tuning in from across the world, and we want this to be a safe and a welcoming space for everyone. So please feel comfortable asking any questions today. All Out Talks are recorded and can be watched on our website. And I'm very excited today for this Out Talk, Coming of Age, the physical and social changes of gender diverse youth. Today, we will hear from inspiring people doing amazing work from across the country. And I'm also very thankful for our moderator today, John. John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Isabella. Hi, everybody. My name is John Sobek. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm really excited about our conversation about this amazing group of guests we have and hoping to open it up as a conversation amongst all of us in our community to learn and grow together. As we're starting today, the one thing that I do want to center is that I am a cis queer male, and I want to make sure that I decenter my voice in our conversation so we can hear from the voices of our panelists from their lived and learned experience. So, with that said, I would love to invite each of them to introduce themselves, share a little about who they are and what they do. And they're getting a secret bonus question that they're just hearing for the first time now. You ready, all? Here it is. Think back in the course of your lifetime so far, who is a mentor or teacher or person who has inspired you in your journey so far in your life? I know that can be a big question. Take a deep breath. But Phoenix Layton, I see a smile showing up on your face. So I'm going to encourage you to maybe introduce yourself first, and we'll start there.
Hi, I'm Phoenix. I go by he, him, mostly he, they, to mostly queer folk. I work at the LGBTQ plus center in Kingston, New York. I'm the program specialist there. I am 23, going to be turning 24 soon. And I'd say for me, a big inspiration probably were my music teachers. They really saw like potential in me and didn't treat me other based on other characteristics about me. They really just saw for me for this kid can do a thing. So we will boost him rather than oh, you don't do private lessons, so you can't be first chair. So they really inspired me and made me feel like, oh no, I can be good and advance without without having extra stuff.
So I have to ask because you said first chair. What was your instrument at that time?
Yeah. Um, I played the flute for our wind ensemble, and then I played tenor sax in our jazz bands.
Oh, I like it. That's so
Yeah,
Are you
I do
still
look like a flute player.
are you still doing music?
Yeah, I'm actually in a brass band. There's a new queer bar in Kingston. It's called the Unicorn Bar. And I'm a part of their uh like bar band. We
Mm,
kind of open up for other bands.
cool. Well, if you have anything that you want to link in the chat, I'm sure people would love to see the band in action.
Thank you.
And Brady, why don't we turn towards you?
Yeah. First, I'm just gonna say I was also a band kid. So that made me excited to play that. And I now teach private lessons. So, um, but yeah, my name is Brady. I use they them pronouns. I'm the development and communications coordinator at Seacoast Outright in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And someone I look up to, the first person who came to mind, was my supervisor for my college internship. They were the first, like over 30-year-old non-binary person I met. So which is crazy that that feels elder, but to me, I was like, oh, a non-binary adult who's out there, has a job, is supporting queer youth. Um, so I'm still really close to them and I look up to the work they do. And that really pushed me to get into this work, and be non-binary representation for kids now. Oh, and I didn't say, but I am also 23.
Oh, wait, Brady, what's your instrument?
I played clarinet and actually also tenor sax, but mostly clarinet.
It's
Wait,
being a
we're forming our own band, our own wind ensemble.
Definitely good.
Phoenix, what do you play? Phoenix Levant.
Oh, playing a little bit of piano, flute, and baritone.
Nice. We're going on the road, people.
Let's get the band together.
So, Phoenix, if you're comfortable, share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh, my name is Phoenix Lamar. I use he, him pronouns. I currently work out in Memphis as a sexual health and wellness specialist. And I just got heat trained. So I will be getting into testing for HIV and helping people with PrEP navigation, as well as helping people who test positive get the proper resources that they need as well. Somebody that inspired me really is my dad, because he's 68 and he like lives so much life, and he doesn't let anything stop him from like getting stuff done. So I'm like, yeah, well, that's the man I aspire to be. That's the type of man I want to be.
I like it. It's so funny because I actually had thought of a different person, but when you said that, it actually switched to my mom. Um, my mom had led a very kind of contained life, but after my dad passed away, she became one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. And at 83, when she's supposed to be settling down, she took a trip like up to the Arctic Circle to see the polar bears because she'd always wanted to. And her spirit like inspires me so much in all the work that I do today. So I'm going to change to my mom because of your sharing about your dad. Yeah. So yeah, my name is John Sobek. I'm a therapist here in Pasadena, California. My pronouns are he, him. And I'm also the author of Out, a parent's guide supporting your LGBTQIA plus kid through coming out and beyond. And I've been part of the OutCare Health family for quite a few years now. And I really love and enjoy the work that they do, but also monthly when we do these panels, it's always really a beautiful experience. And hopefully for all of our clinicians listening today and our providers that you will be able to take away some information that will make you a more effective clinician out in the world as well. And if I really start from that point, I we like to go for the professional and the personal here. And I'm just wondering, like, what has your journey been within navigating the healthcare system, the provider system? Where have you found spaces that have been affirming and helpful? Where have been moments where it's been less affirming and it took your own like moxie and self-awareness to get through? That's kind of a big question, but I think it's a place to open up to maybe help our providers understand like part of the journey here. And Brady, I'm going to start with you.
It is a big question. And there are a lot of different directions to go in with it. But I think the most positive experiences I've had with healthcare providers is just like when I'm upfront about my identity, because I think it's hard if you go into an appointment and then like 3 appointments later, you're like, tell them like, this is my identity. And I get how that can be nervous, but then they have like nerve wracking, but then they have an understanding of your identity. So it might be harder to switch. So I think if you're able to listen to your clients and patients like as soon as they come to you with something, that's really helpful. And also just understanding the anxiety behind it. Sometimes there's no need to worry, but every time I see a new provider, it's like, how are they going to perceive me? Are they going to assume that I'm a man because I'm more mask presenting? But also I was assigned female at birth, so that changes how my care needs to be handled. So just trying to control your facial expressions. Like I've had doctors who are like really surprised when I tell them I was assigned female at birth, and you can see it on their face. And that's just kind of like tough to see in someone who's supposed to be helping you. So just being aware of how you react to someone and how you perceive someone, especially when they're telling you that personal information, is really important.
Either the Phoenixes, you want to step in?
Oh, all right, I'll step in. Yeah, healthcare is definitely like a sore subject for me, especially in my transness. Throughout this like panel, theme of my story is that I don't pass like at all. So people just kind of I don't know what specifically they assume, but they mostly assume I'm just like a lesbian. And they assume that I'm a girl, and I'm not a girl. So navigating healthcare is always kind of like a nightmare, especially because I tend to not get taken seriously. I had a problem recently where I had like kind of a healthcare emergency, and I just had doctors kind of like talking to me in a very condescending tone. And they don't hear me out on like what I'm saying. But I'd say the better spaces I've been in, I just recently had top surgery, and that was a very, very nice experience of like doctors just using my pronouns. Um, and I don't have to like explicitly tell them or correct them every time. They I also went to the hospital recently, and it was a very nice experience I had with I'm pretty sure he was gay, a gay nurse, and, he was asking me questions that it's like, you know what you're talking about." He was like, "Are you on the testosterone right now?" I was like, "No." Um, but that's a very good question to ask, and then he was like, "Have you been binding a lot? Like, are you being safe with your binder?" I'm like, "Okay, I see that you've done some research." So it's really like the more educated providers have been, the better the experience has been for me. Especially when they've like heard first accounts from trans people, because I feel like you can read um as much as you want, but like talking one on one to trans people will really get you very far in caring for trans people.
And Phoenix Lamont, anything you would add to this?
I think my experience really is just my best experiences are when I deal with healthcare providers who step outside of the fact that they've like spent 8 to 12 years in school for this, and they have an understanding that while you went to school for this amount of time, the whole time you've been in school, life has been evolving. The world around you is changing. You may have like the medical practice, but you still need the social awareness. And like all of the incidents that I run into where I've been uncomfortable with a provider, it's just been like a total lack of social awareness, or just been like, I'll tell them, hello, my name's Phoenix. I'm a trans man. I use he, him pronouns. And then it's just kind of a thing of like, they don't address me at all. It's kind of like I'll have like two healthcare providers in the room, and they just use my name instead of my pronouns. And it's like, that's terrible bedside manner. And yeah, I feel like it may cause a problem with trans folks and gender nonconforming folks, where it's like, yes, I have this thing that is bothering me like physically, but I really don't feel comfortable getting it checked out because I don't know what reaction I'm going to get from a healthcare provider. And that is extremely unsafe.
And
I
because you
think
won't
that's
audit at this, could you share a little bit more about this providers talking over you rather than to you?
It's just like, it's like other doctor, like there'll be a doctor and a nurse or two doctors. They're like, well, the patient says when they should be speaking to me, like they're just having a conversation about me in the room. And they're like, well, he came in and said not even it would be nice, but they're like, the patient said they're experiencing pain at this part of the abdomen and it's been going on for this long, but there's something about transgender, and like I got a diagnosis paper where one of my diagnoses said transgender.
Yeah.
Which real crazy to me is that's not a diagnosis. It's who I am. So
And Brady, you had something you were adding.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I totally agree about using a name instead of pronouns. Like, it's one of the most simple things that I think can be overlooked, but it's so harmful if you know someone's pronouns. Like, there's obviously a difference between not knowing and like defaulting to they, them. But if you know someone's pronouns and they just told you and just refusing to use them is just as hurtful as misgendering someone. So that is such an important thing to bring up.
Yeah. It always feels more disrespectful than just flipping up and like making a mistake. Like when I tell you explicitly my pronouns or you know already, and then you just don't use them, I feel disrespected.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah. And one thing I was curious about, because Phoenix Lamont, you're in Memphis,
Yes.
and Phoenix Layton, you're in upstate New York, yeah?
Yeah.
And then Brady, I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I'm in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Do you suspect or know from your experience, is there a huge difference in rural communities versus cityscapes? Like what's the experience there for doctors, living in larger populations, maybe more access to care versus a community that may have one person who has a limited experience in providing care?
In my experience, it really depends. I've only ever lived in New York, but I've lived in different like areas of New York. I've never lived in the city though, but I'm from Long Island, which is a lot more densely populated, but politically it's very right and very red. So it's like I've had the same experiences throughout New York of just like negative trans experiences. I'd say it's worse on Long Island than it is up here. At least up here, I mean, in my opinion, the Hudson Valley is very clear. We have Institute for Family Health, which is very queer oriented. They have a very great gender clinic. I don't know what to call it, but yeah, it's just regardless of me being in New York, and you would think it would be a lot better if still had very rough experiences um, in healthcare.
I grew up in rural Maine, so I've definitely seen a little bit of a difference, like the more southern I get, because I live in southern New Hampshire. Um, so I kind of went from like up in Maine to like slightly more southern, and I know it's still the north. But Portsmouth, New Hampshire has definitely been more accepting than Waterville, Maine. But like I would say in general, as I keep going down the East Coast, it's more accepting. Like I think Boston is kind of like the closest hub to me that has like a lot of practices specifically for gender affirming care. Like there aren't many in this area that like specialize in that. There are doctors that are like affirming, which is obviously super important. But I think I started my transition in my gender affirming care in college through our health center. And leaving that health center, I was like, well, where do I go now? Because there it was like specialized care. And now I'm like, I don't know where to go. I don't know who's going to be helpful. So it's super interesting navigating that. And I do think for me, there's definitely been a difference between the more rural areas up in Maine and in New Hampshire to like Seacoast, New Hampshire and Boston in those areas.
Here in Memphis, it's very interesting. I'll be having top surgery on Halloween, but
Congrats.
thank you. Didn't find anywhere in Memphis. I think there's just now a clinic that's popped up, but nobody's on there. So I'm driving 3.5 hours away to go to Nashville, where they have a Vivid clinic through Vanderbilt, and it's through their plastic surgery, but Vivid clinic is very affirming. Whereas here in Memphis, I run into problems all the time with providers, even like going to the ER, and it's like you just are repeating it. And it's like night and day, Memphis and Nashville. But I have hope that maybe Meet on Memphis will like catch up a little bit. But like I personally like with the insurance I had, I wasn't able to find any gender affirming care in the city of Memphis. So like testosterone, top surgery is all through Nashville and Vanderbilt. So
Yeah, I'll say like New York definitely has a lot more resources, and I'm very, very, very lucky to grow up here and live here in terms of being trans. Like we have a lot. Like I mean, I don't know farther up, but like pretty much wherever you are, you can pretty much locally get trans affirming care or gender affirming care. Top surgery is a little harder because New York is such a big state. I went about like 2 hours away with like kind of the closest. I'm like an hour and a half from the city, but it's not worth going to the city for a surgery that big. Considering like the traffic down there and just like the amount of money it takes to get down there and like tolls and gas is like astronomical. So going like 2 hours kind of up towards Cooperstown was so much better. But like regular healthcare, is where more of my problems lie.
And I want to invite us a space for a little bit of a conversation about the idea. We're gonna go into it. So y'all ready? Right now, we're living in a system that has made the idea of gender affirming care. There's a lot of vitriol, a lot of hate, a lot of salacious stories about it. There's a lot of misinformation that's going out into the world. And I was wondering if you feel comfortable sharing not just this physical process, but maybe a little bit about the emotional, the social, the wellness aspects of you pursuing care that helps you to be the best version of yourself, to help people move away from the idea of just these mechanical things happening, but this bigger social, emotional, personal experience of what this journey brings for you.
Yeah. I actually moved to Memphis from Detroit. Mhm. So I know for a fact gender affirming care is like way different in the state of Michigan. And I was very grateful to have the opportunity to get top surgery so soon because in my head, like at the beginning of the year, I didn't think it was gonna happen. I didn't think I was gonna be on testosterone. But it's one of those things where it feels like I'm racing a clock to like get the care I need so that like my mental health can be okay because I am in the state of Tennessee. And a lot of people have been like, oh, you could just move. Moving out of a state that is anti trans really is not going to fix the problem. Like, somebody got to be here to fight. Somebody has to do it. And it's hard to do. It is very tiring. It is very emotionally taxing. But somebody has to do it. And I'm like at the point where I'm willing to do it. Like, if it's just me in the state of Tennessee fighting to try and help people do it, like, especially now that I know, like, Nashville's, like, in the middle of the state. So it's fairly accessible, like, for people to get to, but it's scary. Like, at the end of the day, like, it is very frightening living in the state of Tennessee, especially where I am, like, because Memphis is right by Arkansas and Mississippi. And, like, Tennessee is actually the more progressive out of the 3 as far as gender affirming care. Like, I know people who stay in Mississippi and Arkansas. They all have gone out of state for surgery at least. Um, and I think people have to understand that us getting this gender affirming care is not hurting anyone, but when people fight to take our right for, like, things that we need to mentally function, you're hurting us. Like, not to get grim, not to get dark, but the thought of not having access to these basic things, it makes life kinda not worth living, and it's very disheartening and it's very hard. So
I think that's the biggest thing to stress, that gender affirming care can really be life saving. Um, and it's not even always the physical changes. I know for me, before I started testosterone when I was 19. Um, the year before, I had been hospitalized twice for my mental health, and I was just in a really awful place. Um, and like within a month after I started testosterone, I just felt the joy come back into my body. And that was too soon to start seeing physical changes. It's not like I looked different or really felt different, but I felt like I was moving towards being myself. And that was enough um, to bring happiness back in my life. And that's really like where I see my life shifting, where I was never hospitalized again or doing self-harming, self-destructive behaviors, like that all stopped pretty much when I started testosterone. And I remember waking up from my top surgery just over a year ago, and you're on anesthesia. It's a major surgery, but the first thing I remember saying was, "This is the best day of my life." And I think about that a lot because I was on drugs, and not super with it. And the first thing I remember is being like, "This is the best day ever," and I still stand by that. So I just think if that doesn't tell you how important it is, I don't really know what will.
Yeah, it's like so like gender affirming care is so politicized when like obviously it shouldn't be, but like the words that they use are so specific in the way that they create fear, like how they call the surgeries that we get mutilation, right? Like you're mutilating kids. My scars, I love my scars, right? Like I've stopped doing scar care because I love how they look. It's like, it's not, they're not that invasive of surgeries. And like every trans person I know, you don't just sign up to do it and like you get it next week. It takes months, it takes years of you talking to other trans people, of people further along the line in their journey. It takes doing your own research on like, okay, what type of surgery am I going to get? What are the specific things I'm going to ask? Where can I even get this surgery? Who's going to do it? Who's going to take care of me? It takes so much planning and so much knowledge that it's like when someone talks to me and they're like, well, are you going to get, that surgery? Cause it's like, this. And I'm like, I know, I'm very aware. Um, I, I'm not doing this for fun. I'm doing this to function day to day. Right. Like the difference for me every day, because though I started with like a smaller chest, which I'm very lucky to have, but like every morning getting ready for work, now it's so easy because I don't have to worry looking in the mirror of like, okay, my chest is showing. That means I'm not going to pass today. You know what I mean? But if I wear a binder today, I'm going to be in pain. So it's like that fight with yourself every morning and giving like people the chance to have this care takes that just daily burden away. And it's not like in my real day to day life, I do not find many like kids looking to get like surgeries. The craziest thing I ever hear is like hormone blockers, which are like, in my opinion, like a lot of gender affirming care can be like reversible in some ways. And it's like, because if you can transition to one gender, you can transition back. Like, true. You, it's what you need to do for your body. And, like you can learn from mistakes, is my thoughts.
Also, I think people forget that gender affirming care does not just benefit trans and non-binary.
Oh my God.
Yes. Like it's not just us that need it. Like there are cis men who have low sperm count, want to have a baby. What do? You take testosterone.
Yep.
You take testosterone. There are women with PCOS. Sometimes they take estrogen to balance things out. It's like this plan that they have is not going to end the way they think it is. Right.
And I first want to share, y'all are getting the most like hearts and applause emojis like popping up here than any other conversation we've ever had.
Wow.
So thank you all so much for your vulnerability in this conversation. It's just really, the audience is just feeling you and they're sending you tons of love. So please, please be aware that that love is coming at you. We do have the Q&A open. Christy has a question she put in there they put in there relatively early. Sorry, Christy, I do not know your pronouns. I apologize. And if anybody else has other questions they would like to put into the Q&A, you can add them in and we'll open them up to our panelists as well. So Christy's question was, there one thing you could change about the healthcare system that would benefit you? What might that be?
not having to go through a PCP for everything, because it's like, oh, I have to pay a copay just to be told, oh, this might be what's wrong with you. So go to this doctor, but it might not work out. And then it's just doing circles.
This is like the biggest thing ever, but I would love to change our healthcare, like our insurance system,
Oh my God.
because I paid like $7,000 for my top surgery, and that was with insurance coverage. Like, which is insane to me. And I had to jump through so many hoops to get that little bit of insurance coverage that I did get. There were no top surgeons within my network, so it was out of network, um, because I have main insurance. um, and I needed like notes from therapists. I needed to be on testosterone for a certain amount of time. And I'm lucky that I'm privileged enough to like, I had been on testosterone and that's something I wanted. Some people don't want to be on testosterone. I'm lucky that I had therapists who would write letters for me and would be affirming. So if we could get rid of those hoops to jump through, and I know they're important to an extent, but not the extent that I went through. Like, I do think people should think about the surgeries they're getting, but that also doesn't mean spending thousands of dollars just for a therapist to write you a letter that says, I believe them.
I would change the fact that like you don't necessarily always have to like sit like certain things like this journey to top surgery has been really weird. Like I'm like sitting in front of like 3 doctors a day. Like I wish there was a way to where they could make like getting labs done way easier. Like I get there are labs, but I feel like it should be separate. Like you're trying to separate us already. Like give us a little bit of time because it's also a little uncomfortable. It's a little uncomfortable because, people at front desk aren't always quiet. So they're like, oh, we're checking your estrogen levels and your testosterone levels. And people are just like, what? What are you doing that for? And it's like, well, mind your business. With a little bit more privacy and like, oh, that's my main point. I wish they had more social training, like healthcare providers as a whole. Like I'm talking like it probably needs to be like a yearly thing, honestly. Where like they come together. I don't know if it's a conference or just like training throughout the week for a week, but like the competency training and the social training, it needs to be there. It's not always there.
I definitely, oh God, I agree with the other Phoenix so much. It's just like socially, they like in my experiences, they just don't know how to treat me. So it's like if they just part of their journey to becoming a provider means like working with different communities and hearing from those people and what they need, would benefit the system so much.
And this brings up an interesting question as well. Jessica just threw this in. What have you found to be most helpful in working with the mental health providers that you've worked with? What have you found to be the least helpful on the mental health side?
I think, because for me, I'm very firm in my gender. Like, I don't need therapy to figure out my gender. So it's helpful when that's not like the root of our conversation, or like my therapist doesn't be like, well, do you think like this is rooted in, though sometimes fair, but like most of the time, I don't think it is. Like I'm very aware when a problem of mine is rooted in my transness, but I hate when it's like this, when it's considered like the center of what's wrong when it's not, you know? Like how the other Phoenix, you get um diagnosed with like being trans and you get diagnosed with gender dysphoria when that wasn't the point, you know? We're not here for that.
I feel like mine is almost the opposite. Just because like when I've had cis mental health providers in the past and it's been like, I'm trying to talk to you about this issue regarding my gender, and they're like, I don't think you should take it so personally. Like, literally had that said to me. And I'm like, well, it is deeply personal because I can't ever step out of my transness. And I'm always walking through the world in this body and this identity. And while like Phoenix is talking about, some issues are different, I also need you to hear me when the issues are related to my trans list. So I think it's really helpful when you're just kind of like, sounds simple, but listening to what your client is saying, and trying to ask more about it rather than challenge it. I think just in general, that's a good practice to have instead of like if someone's telling you they want top surgery, the question is are you sure you're ready for that? The question is, how did you come to that decision? What feels good about that? What are you excited about? Um, so just trying to come from a more positive perspective is what I've found more helpful in my mental health um, experiences rather than trying to kind of shut me down with are you sure that's really what happened?
Yeah, like understanding nuances are really important.
My experience, like, just like having affirming healthcare providers, it's just like, well, listen, like, set your degree aside for a second. Yes, you worked hard. But look at me as the individual patient and not your case study when you were doing labs.
And it's an interesting thing, and I just want to address because something you said earlier about talking about the patient when you're sitting in the room. That's a thing that a lot of medical education systems use in talking about the person who's sitting there in the room with them, this the patient thing. And I think that addresses another big piece of the puzzle is it's a person and really being able to see them as a fully realized person. So one of the things that's showing up here in a couple of questions, and this is about, and I think, once again, this is a big national salacious question right now, and I want to hit it in a respectful way. Is like, what are your thoughts about how do we work with younger people who are exploring their gender, starting to make statements about who they are? Um, we had one question: how do we support them best, but also educate them to ensure they aren't what society deems as confused? Another question, and this one's personal to you. You can choose to answer or not. About what age did you feel solid in your gender identity? If we kind of bring those questions together about youth and gender affirming movement and support, what would you put out into those?
Give them space to express. Like, don't always listen to respond. Like, let them get that off their chest. Because at one point, I was a 15-year-old teenage girl who expressed to people, hey, I think I'm trans. And it immediately got shut down. And that is one of the most damaging things that you can do. Um, because we have to stop looking at children as like possessions and property and see them as human beings to where it is our responsibility to build them up, to give them the tools they need to be productive members of society, not tailor them to the way we want them to be, because it's never going to happen that way. And it's very rare that somebody is confused about gender identity or sexuality. I feel like that's a common misconception from my own personal experience and talking to people that know.
Yeah, I feel like allowing kids to change their mind, allowing people to change their mind is important. Allowing kids to change their mind is like so much more important because like they're learning who they are. Um, so like I feel like every queer person I know goes through, or especially trans, goes through a journey of like identities, right? Like I used to identify as a lesbian. And then when I went to college and people started asking me my pronouns, I was like, oh, I have like a say in the matter. So then I started exploring my gender identity. I did have trans friends in high school, but they did not have like the best experiences. Um, Even though my high school was very like gay friendly, it was not very trans friendly. A lot of my friends were very transphobic and thus like I had a lot of internalized transphobia of like, no, I'm not trans because I like wearing skirts and dresses. It's like, no, you can be trans. You can be a trans man and like wearing skirts and dresses. But it's allowing to kids to say like, oh, like I think I'm non-binary. I'm gonna go by she then. Oh, I think I'm or like, oh, I go by they them now. To like allow them to have their own journey to get like to where they need to be solid. Um, can prevent them from having a lot of work to do when they're in their adult life and trying to establish themselves as an adult, right? Like that's like my experience now of like I'm establishing myself as a person socially as a queer person um in terms of like my identity and stuff, but also trying to establish myself as an adult of like, okay, I have a job, need to pay rent, I have a car. No, so I'm not juggling all of that at once.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add because I was gonna say pretty much everything y'all said, which I love. Just like reiterating that it's okay if things change. If they change their pronouns every day, that's life. Like go with it. Do your best to keep up. Because at the end of the day, it helps them feel more confident and they're gonna figure it out eventually. But if you shut them down, it's gonna take them longer. And they're gonna feel more of that internalized transphobia, and more of that pain. And I also think it's so important to understand that you can come out at any age and that's okay. I think there's a narrative that if you didn't know when you were like 5, you're not really trans. And I didn't come out or even like understand what I was feeling until I got to college. And I knew I felt different, but I wore the dresses. I liked the makeup. I still wear makeup. I So I was like, I don't really know what's going on here until I heard the language, which is why it's so important to have representation. Um, and like regarding when I felt, solid in my gender identity, that didn't happen until I was like 20, which is also okay. Um, so just understanding that everyone's timeline is different and that's totally okay.
And because all of you are very public facing in your journey, in your work, and your identities, I mean, even being here having this conversation today, we have a question open up about, well, what would you recommend for our people who are participating and will be listening later on and ways that they could advocate for better policies in their LGBTQ community, maybe both locally and nationally, depending on where you feel more comfortable addressing it?
Learning how to be a better ally is so um like game changing. I try to have I have conversations with people a lot about how to just navigate trans people better. It's like a way to say that. Of like, when you're in a room with people and you have a trans friend there and someone that's cis or honestly regardless, someone misgenders them. Like, don't leave the responsibility on them to correct that person because that it takes so much mental energy, like as a trans person every day to correct people. It means so much to me when the people around me, especially when they're cis, to correct others. Um, it's it makes such a difference. It helps me feel more confident in who I am and for me to feel less confused. Because again, like I don't pass very often. And so like getting misgendered all day, I go home and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so confused, right? Because it's like I feel like I know who I am. I'm he, him. But then like I just get she, heard all day. And I'm like, am I? Do I need to change something? Like it gets confusing. So like being a better advocate for these people is always my recommendation.
I also think if you can get involved some way in like policy, like I testified at the state house against some anti-LGBTQ laws for the first time when I was in college, and I wish I didn't have to do that, but also I'm glad I had that experience. It's super powerful, and I think if you, as a provider, a clinician, or like whatever role you're in, can show up and to those sort of things, even if you're not testifying, just showing up like in solidarity to these rallies, if your state is introducing a lot of these policies, that can mean a lot. And also, I'll just reiterate, as has been said by others, like training. And there are a lot of places in most states that offer trainings, usually by queer people, by trans people. Um, and that's a great way to bring in LGBTQ people to your space, hear from them directly, and get some training on how to best support people like us.
Pretty much the same thing they said, but just be willing to listen and learn.
And just for everyone who's with us today, do know that Outcare Health provides all levels of training. And we're a great resource and can be part of your community if you want us to have come into your organization and help you in this journey. Um, another thing that I I've been sensing in our conversation today is, and Phoenix Laxton, I think you shared it really honestly, is some of the exhaustion of just trying to live who you are. And I think that's a really important thing for the people we're sharing this with today to also understand how much work this journey takes and how much energy it takes for each of you on a daily basis. And I don't want to assume anything, but I'd like to open that up a little bit if you're willing to share about just the sheer energy and sometimes exhaustion from this.
Yeah, it takes a lot of mental energy. Like just today, I'll be having a good day and I'll feel confident and I'm like, okay, I look good, love my outfit, I look great, and then someone misgenders me and I'm like, oh, okay, or something's wrong, and that's the immediate of like, okay, something's wrong, I'm doing something wrong, and it's the mental um energy of trying to figure that out and like it's the mental energy of trying to dissect everything about me to figure out what's not working, right? So that I'm not perceived as a woman or a girl. Um, so that I'm perceived as just a guy, of which I am.
Yeah, we live in a world where people are taught to like look at someone and put them in a category. And this is something I'm also unlearning as a trans person. But it's been so interesting to go from one end of the spectrum, being perceived as a woman when I didn't want to be, to being perceived as a man when I don't want to be. And I did forms of physical transition that are usually reserved for trans men, and I'm a non-binary person. I'm not a trans man, and it really affirmed my gender. So walking through life, and it took me years to stop being like, it's okay if someone he hims me, because I would be like, it's better than her, so it's fine. It is what it is. For a while, I even went by he, they, because I was like, people are going to use he anyways. And then I was like, it's not worth it to use pronouns that aren't mine just to appease other people. So it's been wacky to see both sides of the spectrum. And then also living in like, I work in Portsmouth, but I live like 30 minutes north of Portsmouth, and it's not always the most affirming town. And I dyed my hair pink and purple this weekend. And the first time at the gym, I was like, oh God, I'm probably going to get wacky looks. And whenever I paint my nails, I'm like, is someone going to say something about this? Because I'm a mask presenting person doing sometimes things that are perceived as feminine. So it's super interesting. And I guess I just have to remind myself to dress for me and to do me, and know that the people who love me and care about me will gender me the correct way. And it's okay to let go of people who don't support me.
It's definitely exhausting. I went rock climbing with my friends a few weeks ago. The instructor was just like pointing, everybody else is cis, and I'm the only trans person, pre-top surgery. It's like pointing me, her, like, she's doing it right, she's doing it right. And my friends were like, like, do you want us to say something? And I'm like, no. They're like, did you tell him your pronouns? I'm like, I did, but I'm like, I'm exhausted. And then like, I couldn't even enjoy rock climbing because it was so exhausting. And then like my friends were like, they got agitated because of me. Like I just shut down. Like I'm like, okay, I've told you 2 times. I'm gonna take the third. Like I shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
They got so mad, and I'm like, oh, yep, thank you, but it's okay. They're like, no, it's not. I'm like, touche, it's not.
Yeah. It's the like, most of my friends are transmasculine, and it's us like going to the diner and we're all sitting down. None of us have long hair, nothing. Like we all look at least queer. Um, and it's the waitress or waiter coming up to the table and be like, hello, hi, ladies. Oh, how can I, it's that of just like everyone takes a big sigh of like, hi, you know, it just ruins the mood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have one little rule in my head that kind of preserves me a little bit, not too much. Like how I gauge whether or not I correct people with my pronouns. And one, am I gonna see you again? Two, like how long is our interaction going to last? And like it doesn't always help, but sometimes it does. It's really just a hit or miss. Like depending on how many times before that moment I've been misgendered. So
And Phoenix, if I can grab hold of that, if we're looking at a care providing situation, that's why what you mentioned earlier, this idea of being personal, being real, using pronouns that are authentic, using names that are authentic, because that hopefully will be a long term relationship that will continue to grow. And that simple effort can build so much trust in the room. So we are coming to time for today. And the one question we always like to close with, especially when we have such a great, inspirational, amazing panel, is if you just look really deep inside your heart, your soul, what is your hope or vision for the future?
And going off what I said a few minutes ago, I hope we grow out of looking at people and assigning them a gender. I hope like that's just not something that's built into kids as they grow up. I hope it's just like you talk to a person and learn about them and learn from them what their gender is and not look at their gender expression and decide. And I also hope that we stop harshly assigning like sex and gender to kids, especially young kids through like gender reveals and stuff. Um, Obviously it's important for like how you provide care to know the assigned sex, but it's not important to, get them the same color of everything and make sure everyone knows what genitalia they have based on what sex they were assigned at birth. So those are my two.
Oh, mine is definitely protecting trans youth. They're very important and they're a very sensitive population. Also something that I want to mention before we go is I forgotten this because my name is legally changed, but like having your name not legally changed in the medical care system is so awful. Like I will give the front desk my chosen name and then right, and my pronouns, and then the person will come at the door and be like, "Hi, dead name," and I'm like, "Okay, all right."
like
It's
we're
constant. No one reads charts apparently.
my hope is just that people can learn to specifically the hateful people, because that's really all it is that they can learn that our gender affirming care, our self care, us loving ourselves and caring about ourselves is not taking away from anything that they ever had going. Also, trans and gender nonconforming people have been around since the beginning of the world. We aren't going to go anywhere.
And you are blowing up the heartbeat emoji. So, with that, I need to bring our conversation to a close for today. And I want to thank you all so much for your wisdom, for your sharing of your personal stories, your lived experience. And hopefully, this will help all of our providers and the people listening as well today and to the recorded session in the future to be more affirming in their care of all communities. So, with that said, I am going to bring us to a close. Just a reminder that next month we are exploring beyond the binary, affirming intersex communities in a gendered world. And that'll be taking place October 17th, 3 p.m. West Coast time, 6 p.m. East Coast time, and every other time. You got to figure it out. So, thank you all so much. And probably by next week, this recording will be available on the website. So, please feel free to share it with other people in the community who think you'd learn from the value of our conversation today. Once again, thank you all so much and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Y'all have a good one. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Yeah.